The flashing red and blue lights reflected off my windows before I even heard the knock. For a split second, my stomach dropped. I knew exactly why they were here, because someone in my neighborhood wanted trouble. But what that person didn't know was that everyone inside my house had a badge. It started as a simple get-together. Nothing wild, nothing loud. Just a few friends from work finally getting a night off at the same time. We had burgers on the grill, a football game playing quietly in the background, and a table full of laughter that felt rare after months of stressful shifts. Most people in the neighborhood didn't even notice us. Except one person. The Karen who watched every house like it was her full-time job. I had seen her earlier that afternoon, standing near the sidewalk with her arms crossed, pretending to check her phone while obviously staring into my yard. She didn't like me. Ever since I moved in, she found something to complain about. My truck, my mailbox color, even the way I parked in my own driveway. I ignored it, but that night, she apparently decided she'd had enough. Halfway through dinner, my buddy Marcus laughed and said, "You know she's gonna file another complaint, right?" We all joked about it. Nobody thought she'd actually call the police. Then came the knock. 3 loud hits on the front door. The room went quiet. Conversations stopped. My friends exchanged looks, already guessing what was happening. I walked over and opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers standing under my porch light, looking serious but slightly confused. "Good evening, sir," one of them said. "We received a report of a suspicious gathering here." Behind me, the living room went silent. You could almost feel the amusement rising because half the people inside were cops, detectives, patrol officers, and even a retired sergeant. I took a breath, stepped aside, and said calmly, "Well, you might want to come in and see for yourselves." The moment they stepped inside, their expressions changed. Recognition flickered. One officer blinked twice and let out a quiet laugh when he spotted Marcus holding a burger. And that's when everything shifted. Because the complaint that was meant to get us in trouble was about to blow up in the most unexpected way, and the person watching from across the street had no idea what she had started. The 2 officers stepped fully into the living room, and the tension that had filled the doorway instantly melted into something closer to disbelief. One of them looked around, slowly scanning the faces, then froze when he recognized the retired sergeant sitting near the coffee table. The other officer let out a short laugh under his breath and whispered, "You've gotta be kidding me." Marcus raised his burger like a toast. "Evening, officers," he said casually, grinning. "You here for dinner or paperwork?" The room broke into quiet laughter, but the officers still tried to remain professional. They explained that the call had come in as a report of a suspicious gathering, possibly involving unknown men entering and leaving the house. According to the complaint, it looked like a secret meeting, maybe even something illegal. Hearing those words out loud made everyone exchange looks. Somebody muttered, "Wow, she really went for it this time." I invited the officers to look around. The grill smoke drifting in from the backyard, the sports game humming on the TV, the plates piled on the counter. It was clearly just a group of friends enjoying their night off. One officer shook his head, amused. "We get calls like this all the time," he said quietly. "But this one is different." That's when the retired sergeant stood up and extended his hand. "Name's Carter," he said. 30 years with the department. Glad to see the new guys are working hard." Both officers immediately straightened a little, respectful but embarrassed. The situation had officially flipped. Instead of confronting suspects, they were now standing in a room full of off-duty law enforcement. Outside the window, I noticed movement. A silhouette near the sidewalk. The Karen, pretending to walk her dog while clearly watching the house. Her phone was still in her hand. She was waiting for the scene she imagined. Handcuffs, accusations, maybe a little neighborhood humiliation for me. She couldn't hear the laughter inside or see the smiles spreading across the room. One officer asked politely, "Mind if we just confirm everything's good and close the call?" I nodded. They did a quick walk-through, exchanged a few friendly jokes, and relaxed completely once they realized there was absolutely nothing wrong. One of my friends even offered them a burger, which they declined with a grin. As they prepared to leave, the younger officer hesitated near the door. "Who made the call?" he asked carefully. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We all knew. He sighed slightly. Like this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with unnecessary WA drama. What none of us realized yet was that this simple misunderstanding wasn't going to end at the doorway, because outside, someone was already planning her next move, and she wasn't happy with how this situation was unfolding. The moment the officers stepped back onto my porch, I followed them outside, still trying not to laugh at how quickly the situation had turned from serious to awkward. Snow from earlier in the week crunched under our shoes, and the cold air hit like a reset button after the warmth inside. Across the street, the WA Karen froze mid-step when she saw us talking casually instead of handing out citations or making arrests. Her fake dog walk suddenly looked very real as she tugged the leash and turned away, but not before the younger officer noticed her watching. He followed my gaze and quietly asked, "Is that the person who usually reports you?" I shrugged. "Let's just say she's very invested in neighborhood safety." He smirked, clearly understanding exactly what I meant. The older officer kept things professional, saying they had to close the call as unfounded. No disturbance, no illegal activity, just friends spending time together. Before leaving, he lowered his voice and added, "Honestly, you handled this better than most people would." As the patrol car pulled away, I thought the drama was over. I should have known better. Inside, the mood bounced right back to relaxed laughter. Someone turned up the volume on the game, another friend grabbed fresh drinks, and Marcus kept joking about how we should frame the police report like a souvenir. But every few minutes, someone peeked through the blinds and saw the same figure lingering near the corner. She wasn't done watching. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I moved to this neighborhood because it was supposed to be quiet. Tree-lined streets, calm evenings, neighbors who waved politely. Instead, I felt like I was under surveillance. Every small thing became a complaint. My trash cans, my lawn schedule, my guests. It was like living next to someone who considered herself the self-appointed sheriff of the block. Halfway through the evening, my friend Lisa leaned closer and whispered, "You realize she probably expected you to get arrested." "Yeah," I said, shaking my head. "And now she's probably embarrassed." Lisa gave me a knowing look. "People like that don't get embarrassed. They double down." Her words stuck with me. Later, when most of the group moved outside to the backyard fire pit, I noticed headlights slowly creeping past the house. Not police this time, just a neighbor driving extra slowly. Curtains shifted across the street. The whole night suddenly felt different, like a story had started that hadn't reached its real conflict yet. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the WA portal. A new complaint had just been filed, time-stamped less than 10 minutes after the officers left. I opened it, and my jaw tightened. "Suspicious activity continues," it read. "Gathering may be connected to law enforcement influence." She wasn't backing down, and for the first time that night, I realized this wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was about someone who needed control, and she was about to push things further than she ever should have. I stared at the WA notification for a long moment, reading the words again just to make sure I wasn't imagining them. "Suspicious activity continues. Possible misuse of law enforcement influence." My first reaction was disbelief. My second was anger. The officers had already confirmed everything was fine, yet somehow the situation was being rewritten into something darker, like we were the problem. I showed the message to Marcus and Lisa. Their expressions changed instantly. The joking mood faded. "She really filed that after the police cleared you?" Marcus asked, shaking his head. "That's next level." Lisa sighed. "She's trying to build a record. Paper trail. That's how some WA people work." Outside, the fire pit crackled, but the laughter had softened. A few friends pulled out their phones, curious to see the complaint. One of the detectives muttered, "That wording sounds intentional. Like she's trying to push a narrative." That idea unsettled me. A small neighborhood disagreement was turning into something bigger, something official, written down, repeated. And once things were documented, they had a way of lingering. I stepped outside for fresh air. Across the street, her porch light was still on. Curtains shifted slightly, just enough to confirm she was watching. I felt that uncomfortable mix of frustration and exhaustion that comes when someone refuses to let things go. Back inside, the group tried to lighten the mood. Someone turned the TV volume back up. Another joked about needing business cards that said, "Totally not suspicious." But I could feel the energy changing. Everyone knew the night had crossed an invisible line. Then came another knock. This time it wasn't police. It was my next-door neighbor, Tom, standing awkwardly with his hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said quietly, glancing inside. "Just wanted to check. Everything okay? She's been going around telling people something illegal's happening here." I blinked. "She's saying that?" Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah, a few neighbors are confused. I told them you were probably just having friends over." That hit harder than the complaint itself. It meant the story was already spreading. Rumors traveled faster than facts, especially when someone presented themselves as protecting the community. I thanked Tom, and he left with an apologetic shrug. The moment the door closed, I realized this situation wasn't just about me anymore, it was becoming neighborhood gossip. Marcus leaned back on the couch. "You know what's funny?" he said. "She called the cops on a house full of cops, and still thinks she's winning." That line made everyone laugh again, but underneath the humor was concern. If she was willing to keep escalating, what would she do next? As the night wound down and friends started gathering their jackets, my phone buzzed again. Another HOA notification. This time, it wasn't just a complaint. It was a warning, and the wording made my stomach drop, because now it sounded like they were threatening action against my house itself. The message on my phone felt heavier than the cold air outside. I opened it slowly, half hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't. The HOA had issued an official warning, citing repeated suspicious gatherings and community concern. They claimed my property might be violating neighborhood standards and hinted that further incidents could lead to fines or board action. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. How does that even happen? I muttered. Marcus leaned over my shoulder and read silently. His eyebrows shot up. "She really got the board involved," he said. "That's bold." The room fell quiet again. Most of my friends were law enforcement, people used to paperwork and procedures, and even they looked annoyed. The retired sergeant shook his head slowly. "This isn't about safety," he said. "This is about control." I didn't want to believe that, but every piece of the night pointed in that direction. The police had cleared everything. Nothing illegal happened, yet somehow the story had twisted into a formal warning against me. Lisa crossed her arms. "You need to document everything," she said. "Screenshots, timestamps, every message." I nodded. That part felt familiar. Evidence, records, timelines. But it also felt ridiculous that I needed defensive documentation just because I invited friends over. Outside, the neighborhood looked calm. Snow reflected the streetlights, making everything quiet and almost peaceful. It was hard to believe so much drama was brewing behind curtains and HOA emails. As people started leaving, the officers who had responded earlier suddenly returned, not on duty this time, but curious. They stopped by briefly to make sure everything was fine. One of them laughed when I showed him the warning notice. "She reported you again?" he asked. "Apparently," I said. He shook his head. "We closed that call as unfounded. If the HOA is using it to threaten you, that's unusual." Those words stuck with me. When the house finally emptied and the silence settled in, I sat alone at the kitchen table scrolling through the notices. Each one felt more aggressive than the last. The language was careful, almost legal, but the message was clear: stop gathering or face consequences. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Tom next door. "She's telling people you pulled strings with police. Some neighbors believe her." I rubbed my temples. That rumor could damage more than my reputation. It painted me as someone abusing authority, which wasn't just false, it was dangerous. That's when I realized something important. She hadn't expected the police to laugh and leave. She expected power, and when she didn't get it, she doubled down by trying to win through the HOA. I stood up and looked out the window. Her porch light flicked off as soon as she noticed me watching. The warning notice wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger, because the next morning, I would learn that she hadn't just filed complaints, she had started gathering signatures. And that meant the entire neighborhood was about to get pulled into this fight. The next morning felt strangely quiet, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. Fresh snow covered the sidewalks, muting the usual sounds of early traffic. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee, hoping the night's chaos would feel smaller in daylight. Instead, I spotted something that instantly tightened my chest. Across the street, the WA Karen was walking door to door. She wasn't walking her dog this time. She carried a clipboard. At first I told myself it could be anything, a holiday event, a community survey, but deep down I already knew. Sure enough, she stopped at Tom's house, spoke rapidly, and pointed toward my place. Even from a distance, I could see the dramatic hand gestures. I went back inside and checked my phone. A message from Tom arrived seconds later. She's getting signatures for a petition. Says your gatherings make people feel unsafe. I stared at the screen, disbelief turning into frustration. Unsafe. Last night was burgers and football with friends. The worst thing anyone did was argue about which team should have won. By noon, the petition story had spread. A few neighbors avoided eye contact when they passed my driveway. Others looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure what to believe. Rumors traveled fast, especially when someone delivered them confidently. I decided to stay calm. Getting angry would only play into her narrative. Instead, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of WA notices, timestamps of the police visit, even text messages from neighbors confirming what actually happened. Years of watching colleagues handle disputes had taught me one thing: facts mattered more than emotions. That afternoon, Tom stopped by. She came to my door again, he said quietly. I didn't sign. I thanked him, surprised by how much that small support meant. She's telling people you're using police connections to avoid WA rules, he added. Some older residents are buying it. I exhaled slowly. That rumor again. Inside, I replayed the night in my head. The officers had arrived because of her call, not because of me. They followed protocol, nothing more. Yet somehow she had flipped the story into something suspicious. Later, I checked the WA online portal again. A new update had appeared. A special meeting was being scheduled to discuss ongoing community safety concerns. The timing wasn't a coincidence. She wanted an audience. As evening fell, I noticed something else. A few neighbors standing together at the corner, talking quietly. Every time I looked their way, the conversation paused. I wasn't just dealing with one angry WA member anymore. I was dealing with a growing narrative shaping how people saw me. My phone rang. It was Marcus. Hey, he said, word got around about the petition. You okay? Yeah, I replied, though I wasn't sure. He paused. You know this isn't going to end with just paperwork, right? If there's a meeting, she'll push hard. After we hung up, I looked out at the snow-covered street again. The quiet felt heavier now, like calm before something bigger. Because tomorrow night, the WA board meeting would happen, and for the first time, I'd be face to face with the person who started all of this, in front of an entire neighborhood waiting to hear her version of the story. The WA meeting room smelled like old carpet and coffee, the kind of space designed to look official without feeling welcoming. Folding chairs filled quickly as neighbors arrived, whispering in small groups. Some nodded politely at me. Others avoided my eyes. I could feel the tension before the meeting even started. At the front, the WA board sat behind a long table. And there she was, the WA Karen, sitting confidently near the front row, clipboard still in hand, like she had been preparing for this moment all week. I took a seat in the back, calm but alert. The chairperson called the meeting to order and began reading the agenda. When they reached community safety concerns, the room shifted. Heads turned. I felt dozens of eyes on me. She stood up immediately. I believe we have a serious issue, she said, voice loud and controlled. There have been suspicious gatherings, unknown individuals coming and going, and possible abuse of influence with law enforcement. Murmurs spread through the room. She spoke like someone delivering facts, not accusations. That confidence made her words sound convincing. I stayed quiet, waiting. She described the police arriving at my house, framing it as proof something was wrong. She mentioned late-night activity, unfamiliar vehicles, and neighbors feeling uncomfortable. Every sentence carefully built the story she wanted people to believe. When she finished, the chairperson looked toward me. Would you like to respond? I stood slowly. My heart was steady, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I had facts. The gathering she's describing, I began, was a small dinner with coworkers. Off-duty coworkers. I paused, most of whom are law enforcement. The room went silent. I pulled out my phone and held up screenshots of the official call report showing the officers had cleared everything as unfounded. Then I explained calmly that the officers who responded recognized several guests because they worked together. No violations, no disturbances, nothing suspicious. A few neighbors exchanged surprised looks. Someone in the audience asked, "So, the police didn't find anything wrong?" "No," I said clearly. Because there was nothing wrong. The chairperson leaned forward, suddenly more serious. The confidence on the Karen's face faltered for the first time. Then something unexpected happened. One of the responding officers walked in. He wasn't in uniform, just stopping by after hearing about the meeting. He nodded politely at the board and confirmed, in simple professional language, that the call had been closed with no issues. His presence changed the energy instantly. Rumors started collapsing under real information. The Karen's expression tightened. She tried to interrupt, but the chairperson raised a hand, signaling her to wait. A neighbor near the front spoke up. "So this whole thing was just a normal get-together?" I nodded. The room's mood shifted from suspicion to awkward realization. People looked around like they were reconsidering everything they'd heard. The chairperson cleared his throat. "It seems there may have been a misunderstanding." But as the meeting moved toward closing, I noticed the Karen staring at me, not embarrassed, just angry. And that look told me something important. She wasn't finished. Because as people started leaving, the chairperson quietly handed me a sealed envelope, something new, something unexpected, that would change the entire direction of this story. The meeting room slowly emptied as chairs scraped against the floor and neighbors drifted into the cold night air. Conversations buzzed quietly, confused, awkward, uncertain. The energy had clearly shifted in my favor, but I didn't feel relieved yet. My attention stayed fixed on the sealed envelope the chairperson had slipped into my hand. "Read it later," he said quietly before turning away. That single sentence made my stomach tighten. Outside, snow crunched under my boots as I walked toward my truck. The Karen stood near the entrance talking sharply with two board members. Her gestures were tense, defensive. She glanced at me once, her expression hard, then quickly looked away. Whatever confidence she had earlier seemed cracked. I climbed into my truck and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a formal notice, not against me, but addressed to the board itself. It summarized multiple complaints filed by residents over the past year about harassment, excessive reporting, and misuse of complaint procedures. Several names were blacked out for privacy, but one detail stood clear: many complaints appeared connected to the same person. Her. I read it twice, disbelief slowly turning into understanding. This wasn't just about my house. Other neighbors had apparently gone through similar experiences: constant complaints, monitoring, pressure. I wasn't the first target. I was just the one who finally pushed back with evidence. My phone buzzed with a message from Tom. "How'd it go?" I sent a quick reply. "Better than expected." Long story. As I drove home, memories of the past few months started clicking into place. Neighbors who seemed nervous, quick conversations that ended abruptly, stories about small fines people didn't want to fight. Suddenly it all made sense. When I pulled into my driveway, headlights passed slowly again. Same pattern as before, but this time, instead of feeling watched, I felt prepared. Inside the house, the quiet felt heavy but calm. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter and read it again carefully. The board had apparently started an internal review even before tonight's meeting. My situation had just brought everything into the open. Then my phone rang. It was Marcus. "So?" he asked immediately. I told him about the envelope. He whistled softly. "Sounds like this goes deeper than you thought." "Yeah," I said. "Way deeper." He paused. "You know what that means, right? People are finally speaking up." That thought stayed with me long after we hung up. Later that night, I glanced out the window and saw something unusual. Across the street, several neighbors were gathered near the Karen's house, talking quietly. Not confrontational, just serious. The balance of power was shifting, and she could feel it. But stories like this don't end quietly. Because the next morning, I would wake up to something taped to my front door, a final attempt to regain control, and it would force me to make a choice that could change my standing in the neighborhood forever. Morning light spilled across the snow as I opened my front door, and immediately stopped. A sheet of paper was taped to the wood, fluttering slightly in the cold breeze. My first thought was that it was another HOA notice. But when I pulled it free, I realized it wasn't official at all. It was a handwritten letter. The message was short, angry, and unmistakably defensive. It accused me of turning neighbors against each other, claimed I had embarrassed people publicly, and warned that this neighborhood won't forget. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. The tone said everything. I stood there for a long moment, reading it again, feeling a strange mix of frustration and relief. Frustration because the drama still hadn't ended. Relief because it confirmed something important. The truth was finally coming out, and control was slipping away from the person who had tried so hard to create a narrative. Inside, I placed the letter on the counter beside the envelope from the HOA board. 2 pieces of paper, 2 completely different stories. One based on anger, the other on evidence. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Messages from neighbors I rarely heard from before. Thanks for speaking up last night. Sorry we believed the rumors. Didn't realize what was really happening. Each message felt like a small shift in the weight I'd been carrying. Later that afternoon, the HOA announced an updated statement on the community portal. After reviewing facts from the meeting and prior records, they were closing the complaints related to my house and reviewing how reports were handled moving forward. The language was careful, but the meaning was clear. The accusations against me were over. I stepped outside and breathed in the cold air, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Across the street, the HOA Karen's curtains were closed. The constant watchful presence that had defined the neighborhood suddenly felt absent. Tom walked over, hands in his pockets. Guess things finally settled, he said. Looks like it, I replied. He smiled. You know, a lot of people wanted to say something before, they just didn't want the drama. That made sense. Fear of conflict kept people quiet. But once one person pushed back respectfully, others found their voice too. That evening, I hosted another small gathering, nothing big, just a few friends stopping by. Laughter filled the house again, but this time it felt different. Relaxed. Normal. No one watched from across the street. No police lights. No tension hanging over every conversation. As the night wound down, I looked around the room and realized the real lesson from the whole experience. It wasn't about winning an argument or proving someone wrong. It was about staying calm, sticking to facts, and letting the truth speak louder than rumors.
Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. The HOA Karen wanted control, instead, she created unity, and the next time someone drives slowly past my house, it wasn't to watch, it was just a neighbor waving as they passed. If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments.